Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of Press Corner, where me and my fellow journalists, columnists, and other esteemed guests round up the most important topic of the week. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and without further ado, let's proceed. Now, here on Press Corner, we celebrate the privilege of a free press by having a panel full of diverse opinions, and we let you be the judge. So without further ado, let's introduce our panelists here. Starting from my left, Mr. Sebastian Stodolak, Vice President of Warsaw Enterprise Institute. And we also have here Mr. Lukasz Warzecha, journalist from Rzeczy. On my right here, we have Bartosz Kielak, journalist from the UK, as well as Jacek Żakowski, columnist, Collegium Civitas. Hello, guys, and welcome to TVP World. Really appreciate it for taking this time here. Now, our first topic of the day will be revolving around Polish domestic politics. The new administration has launched a series of probes and investigations claiming that the former ruling Law and Justice Party have violated financing rules by using public funds to boost its electoral chances. Before we get into the discussion, let's take a look at a report.
Poland's former ruling party, the right-wing Law and Justice, has been under increasing scrutiny over mounting allegations of corruption. Now, Paweł Szopa, the founder of the patriotic clothing brand Red is Bad, is the subject of a nationwide manhunt. A court has issued a temporary arrest warrant for Szopa as part of a wide-ranging investigation into financial irregularities at the Government Agency for Strategic Reserves. The agency is responsible for managing reserves of food, medicine, equipment and fuel in the event of conflict or natural disaster. The investigation found that Szopa's company received significantly inflated payments for supplies, including generators and water purification systems, through contracts that bypassed standard procedures. Szopa allegedly pocketed 270 million zloty, or more than 60 million euros. The investigation has already led to the arrest of Michał K., the former head of the Strategic Reserves Agency. He is in London awaiting extradition. As for Szopa, he is reportedly abroad and has said that he will return to Poland only if he is guaranteed a fair trial. Authorities are currently waiting for court documents to arrive before launching a search. Meanwhile, a former Deputy Justice Minister is facing serious charges. Michał Woś is accused of illegally purchasing sophisticated spyware using 25 million zlotys, or about 6 million euros, intended for crime victims. If convicted, Woś could face up to 10 years in prison. The Law and Justice lawmaker has denied the charges, criticizing the investigation and claiming he does not recognize the authority of prosecutors.
Now, in order to dive deeper into this topic, I would first like to give a definition of what it means to be using public funds to boost electoral chances. I think that's some of the places where some of the controversy came from. I think we can all agree that if they use public funding to print out some campaign ads and posters, there's probably no argument that this is a violation. But what if it's being used to pursue policies such as welfare that inadvertently boost electoral chances, but in a way that is also policy-oriented? How would you describe the former Law and Justice Party's use of public funds, Jacek?
Difficult question, but easy as well. What they were doing was spending money on their electorate, or in the regions where they were starting in elections. So, were, for example, buying stuff for firefighters, for local firefighters, for public money, not in entire country, but specifically where those guys from the Ministry of Justice were connected. This is not fair, of course. If it's illegal, we'll see in courts.
All right, very much so. Bartosz, what's your take on this? Like we were discussing, what are the difference between using it to pursue policies that's popular and using it to forward its electoral chances?
In a sense, it's quite unprecedented. I don't think international public is fully aware of the scale of misuse of public funding in Poland. I mean, many of the policies of the previous government have come under international criticism, but this particular aspect of it, which is using public funding to boost its electoral policy, has only came under scrutiny in relation to the use of the public broadcaster, the TVP, under the previous government, where it's been used to aggravate the public, the galvanize the public opinion in support of the previous government. In this particular case, you know, it's a ridiculous argument that the person is raising, that he will only come back to Poland if he's guaranteed a fair trial. I think there's been concerns in relation to judiciary conduct under the previous government, and some countries have indeed refused to obey warrants, arrest warrants issued by the Polish government because the fair trial could not be guaranteed. The current government has so far escaped such accusations, so there's very little fear that this person coming back to Poland might indeed face unfair prosecution.
All right, so this brought us to the discussion of, well, some people are accusing that these investigations might be politically motivated. How do we separate these kind of judiciary issues with politics? Lukasz?
Well, first of all, I think that we have to clear some things up, because I have an impression that the video that we have just seen just put too many things into one pot. First, we have to remember that nullum crimen sine lege, so there is no crime without a law. And if I hear that some things were unfair, yes, I can agree they were unfair, but the question is whether they broke the law. And the current government seems not to care about whether this was against the law or not, or just unfair. It sends prosecutors to execute some measures, like, for example, temporary arrest, which might last 3 months, and then again 3 months, and then again 3 months. And this comes down to a person being jailed for many months on end without a fair trial. This is the first thing. Another thing is that we have just seen a motion by the State Electoral Committee, which specifically concerned the question of using public funds illegally to instigate electoral agitation or electoral campaign just before the elections. And then we have some questions about very similar events during the PIS rule on the part of the civic platform. Like the best example is Campus Polska, an event organized by civic platform, by Rafał Trzaskowski, which happened just during the electoral campaign last year, and which evidently contained some elements of campaigning. And it was also organized with public funds, especially the funds of local governments in Poland. So this is all not that simple. I'm not saying that people who are now being accused of using public funds are innocent. This is a completely different thing. And I think if prosecutors can build the charges, they should stand trials. That's obvious. But the question is, what is going on right now with temporary arrest, with the actions of the prosecutors? This is the problem, in my opinion.
All right, thank you so much. Well, Sebastian, can you help us give your take on it? Like I just mentioned, there's a lot of this going into the same pot, and it's very hard to kind of separate the political aspect and the legal aspect of things. And, well, things seem to get a little bit muddy. How would you describe the situation?
Yeah, I think I do agree with Lukasz almost 100%. First of all, we need to separate things that are political from things that should not be political. We have a problem with that in Poland. So the obvious things one can think as, you know, trying to hunt down all the bad guys, persecute them and put them in jail in Poland is not treated as the obvious. It's treated as something that should be done with the help of politicians. Politicians are not there to do investigations. Politicians are not there to do the trials. They are there to rule the country, actually, to implement legislation, to fix the legislation, to make it better, to actually depoliticize the legal system that we have right now. And this is the problem. They are not doing it. So yesterday I checked the statistics of temporary detentions in Poland. They did not change. As for June, it still stays at the level of 8,000 people imprisoned temporarily without a trial in Poland. This is the same number as under the peace rule. So these are the substantial things that does not change. that do not change. But, you know, we hear a lot of buzz around all those political issues, who said what. You know, we have a lot of memes around the internet with this priest, you know, telling guys, and don't torture me, whatever. Well, a lot of emotions, but we are afraid of stripping this down to the core of the problem, depoliticizing of the legal system, I would say.
And I would just like to remind that one thing that has not changed either is the Minister of Justice being at the same time Prosecutor General. So we still have politicized structure of prosecutors because their head is at the same time a politician.
Do you guys think that that is an issue with the politicization of the justice system, Jacek?
Of course it is. It's one of major problems in Poland since years, especially since we started to debate it in very early 2000 years, like 2001, 2002. Then PO and the governing party now and PiS began this debate that the judges are politicized, prosecutors are politicized, and so on. And as more we speak about it, as more we make it. So, this is absolutely a disaster. It grows for years. The problem is how to change it, because if current coalition would try to change it, then there is a president who changed it to be like this, like it is now. And we don't know whether it will be possible before presidential election, and we are not sure it will be possible after the election because we don't know the winner. So, well, yes, this is a structural problem in Poland now.
All right, so it does seem like it is a vicious cycle, but no side is willing to break it, to put themselves in a disadvantage because we're already in sort of a deep water. Bartosz, can you help us understand whether or not there's a solution to this situation?
I mean, a Polish judiciary system is not the only judiciary in Europe or indeed the world that is facing structural problems. The length of the judicial process in Poland is indeed quite substantial. And the person mentioned in your reports, if he's afraid of anything, it might be the fact that he'd be on trial for years and years on end before he actually faces justice. An accusation that is quite often raised by the right-wing media and right-wing politicians in Poland is that they've received unfair treatment on behalf of the Western partners of Poland compared to what Donald Tusk is getting. But it's also a question of image. Donald Tusk is a European politician who has gotten himself to be known as a stable figure, you know, a steady pair of hands throughout the years, and that's a mark of quality that Western partners of Poland are looking for. To an extent, there's voices being raised in Brussels and from Poland's allies that the tempo of change is not what they expected it to be, but also what they certainly do not want is a revolutionary change as opposed to an evolutionary one.
All right, where do you guys see this going forward? Because there's already campaign financing issues when it comes to the Law and Justice Party going into the 2025 elections. Is there an argument to be made that this is, in another way, disadvantage them when it comes to the electoral process and the whole democratic system? Sorry, Lukasz.
Well, yes, obviously they are in disadvantage right now. But I think the question should be about the system itself, the whole system. And this is a discussion that I really lack here in Poland right now. How much should really be political parties getting? How much money should they be getting? What should the rules be of being clear with this money? These are the questions that we should be asking right now, and we are not. I mean, we are perhaps here in this studio, but not other commentators or participants of public life in Poland. In my opinion, the system is crooked. Just the system is crooked. It's unclear. The rules are unclear. As I mentioned before, there is an example of Campus Polska Przyszłości, and there are some examples in the motion of the Polish Electoral Committee, which seemed to be, well, quite clear. I mean, they really speak about, in my opinion, about breaking the law. The question is whether there is a fair treatment of similar cases before on the part of the Electoral Committee, which, by the way, was changed. The way of choosing members of the Electoral Committee was changed back in 2019 by the PIS itself. This is the PIS party which decided that state electoral committee should be in its majority, 7 members out of 9, chosen by the parliament. So we can also say they have what they asked for.
And there is also a deeper cultural problem. How serious are we about the law? Are we serious or not? Mm-hmm. And I think for years, Polish tradition was, we are not so much serious. I mean, if there is a speed limit, like 90, we drive like 120.
Yeah, because everyone...
It's not America. It's not America where you drive exactly what is said. And I think that the PIS and now PO, they declare they want to turn rather American way. I mean, to be extremely serious about what's legal and what's not legal. And this is cultural shock, of course. And when Lukasz asks whether it was the same way considered before, no, it was not. But do we want to follow law strictly, or do we want to follow law Polish way, what means we may not, but we can?
Yes, Jacek, but there is also always a question in such cases, when do we begin? Because
but
the problem
must be
is
a starting point.
Exactly. So that's why I've been proposing that the rules are changed to be much clearer, but that we start to impose them with the next elections, because you don't know who wins the next elections. This seems to be, in my opinion, the fairest way.
It's easy with strictly legal changes. Say, we will start in 5 years or 10 years, whenever. It's much more difficult when you consider cultural change, because you cannot declare.
And using the law, too.
Yes, yes,
It
but
will be also very hard to make people treat law seriously if we first do not reduce the complexity of it. And what we've been doing for 30 years is overproducing laws, different laws, making it even more complicated. So people just stopped treating it seriously because, you know, how can anyone make any sense out of it?
Right.
So unless it's possible, so making sense out of our law.
This is good excuse.
I think it's not an excuse; it's an explanation.
I think this is like very paradoxical, right? On one hand, you're saying that there's a lot of like kind of very complicated laws. On the other, we're using very vague statements like using public funds to boost its electoral chances, which is in itself not very specific when it comes to how it's being interpreted. Bartosz, do you have any input when it comes to like how we here in Poland interpret our rules, regulations?
I wouldn't say it's being interpreted very liberally. To an extent, I mean, my professional focus, at least to a large extent, has been on what was happening with TVP under the previous government. It has been subject to international criticism. It has been widely covered by international media, including the New York Times, including The Guardian, including the BBC, as well as right-wing newspapers. I've myself covered the TVP takeover by the current government for the Times newspaper, and what seemed quite clear at the time was the hope on behalf of the new broadcasters entering the corporation that there won't be any political influence over the organization whatsoever. There's been news reported in Polish domestic media that such influence might have been exerted. There's no evidence of it, but still there's an argument that is currently being raised by right-wing politicians and right-wing media in Poland in a very similar way to what was happening under the previous government. The thing is, the scale of the abuse of the influence over the public media is not as significant as it used to be. The fears over the government exerting any sort of undue influence and trying to resort to public funding to boost their electoral chances will remain in Poland. As I said, this is quite a complicated system. I don't think the situation's as drastic as it was. Every new government coming into power received some sort of a carta blanca where it can depend on the public trust for the time being. But the moment it steps into the government, it starts getting stained with accusations. You know, the image that politicians have, as clean as it might have initially been, it will get stained eventually. And this is the situation that this government is going to face sooner or later.
Right. This is the part where the magnifying glass comes in.
Very shortly, on this, I would add that PIS, Law and Justice Party, did not use its 8 years in power to create any kind of, I would say, firewall between politicians and so-called public media, in fact, state media. But we haven't seen so far any project or proposal on the part of this government either, how to do it. Even though it did say that, yes, we are going to do it, definitely we're going to present our proposals about it. So
the declarations are deeply different. I mean, here we have a declaration that we want to build an independent public media. Before, the declaration was we concur the state-owned media because private media are against us. So this is absolutely different. I mean, what PiS was doing was very open when they were saying we want to create a new elites. What does it mean? New people must to store some money to be new economic elites, and they were doing it openly. So what we see now is a deep change in declarations and no output yet. I say yet, with
fingers crossed.
With hope. No, with hope.
All right, Bartosz, what's your take on it? Since this would be your wheelhouse, do you think we might actually see anything being implemented, or like a firewall, like Lukasz mentioned, or do we see more declaration rather than actual movement?
I mean, the organization itself is in a state of liquidation. There's a question of attitude. Speaking to Polish journalists, meeting Polish journalists, they're usually much more open, discussing their political biases and political views out in the open, in the newsroom as well. This is something I've never encountered, neither in my practice when I worked for the Sky News, when I worked for the BBC. It's virtually unseen for a conversation regarding one's political beliefs to ever happen within the BBC, within the walls of the BBC as an organisation. Absolutely does not exist. There's a very strong and staunchly upheld independence of the organisation and its editorial processes. BBC has come under criticism in recent years due to the fact that the UK Conservative Party has been trying to exert the influence. From an inside point, I can tell you that whichever party raises concerns about the output and the editorial policy of the organisation, this is being addressed, but this is not something that the organisation would ever bow to. Right. The funding is independent. The government has direct influence on the amount of funding that the organisation receives. But this is done in over a number of years, and it's closely tied to the license fee. There is a separate debate here in Poland in what way the TVP should be funded. I know that currently the funds that the TVP is supposed to be getting are being withheld by a body that consists of people elected by the previous government. This is indeed a serious situation. I hope it will be resolved in the near future.
Yes, but there are budget donations from the part of the government for TVP. So it's very similar to the previous situation. It's been several billion this year.
All right, that's a very complicated issue, and we did veer off our main topic a little bit, so we'll have to stay tuned to see if Ben actually gets paid. But let's go to our next topic. We're going to look at the situation in Ukraine, especially on the Russian-Ukrainian front, with the incursion into Kursk happening and President Zelenskyy replacing some of his cabinet members. Before we dive into that, let's take a look at a report.
6 ministers in Ukraine's government have submitted their resignations, including high-profile Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba. With the reshuffle, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is pushing for what he calls new energy at a crucial moment in the ongoing war with Russia. He emphasized the need for fresh leadership to bolster Ukraine's resilience. Kuleba is the most prominent official to be let go. He was instrumental in rallying international support in the face of Russia's invasion. Despite his resignation, analysts do not expect a dramatic shift in Ukraine's foreign policy. First Deputy Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha has been appointed to the post. The reshuffle was reportedly planned a long time ago. It was delayed because of ongoing diplomatic engagements. Although some ministers may be reassigned to new roles, the reshuffle leaves 10 out of 21 ministerial positions vacant. Further appointments are expected soon. The situation on the ground remains tense. Russian forces continue to advance in eastern Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian troops are carrying out a daring operation in Russia's Kursk region. The conflict has intensified, with recent Russian missile and drone strikes causing significant casualties. On Tuesday, September 3rd, at least 50 people were killed in Poltava in what has been described as the deadliest single attack of the war so far this year.
So, of course, discussion continues when it comes to the Ukraine-Russian situation and the perception of the Kursk incursion, as well as the changing of Zelenskyy's government. Starting from this side, Sebastian, can you tell us what to expect out of the new Zelenskyy government? This is a very sensitive timing when it comes to a reshuffle of cabinet. Won't that leave a little bit of question and doubts about where things are going forward?
I think that the scale of this reconstruction, which is significant both when it comes to the numbers and when it comes to the specific ministries, means that it's not an accidental thing, that it has to be a well-thought move on the side of Zelenskyy. This is nothing that just appeared out of nowhere due to some particular circumstances. Some commentators suggested that, for example, resignation of Kuleba, foreign ministry of Ukraine, is due to his appearance in Poland and his speech. This is, of course, totally out of touch with reality. It's not the reason for that. So I think that we should not expect any radical changes in how Ukrainian government operates, in their goals and purposes. I think it will pretty much be consistent with the previous politics, I would say. And also, it's all up to Zelenskyy. He kind of tells his ministers what to do, what to say. If anybody assumes that there is a lot of independence on the side of Ukrainian ministers, I would say that is an overstatement.
Right. Lukasz, do you think that this change is necessary if it's still Zelenskyy making these decisions at the end of the day anyways? What's the point of this reshuffle if this structure is going to remain very similar?
Well, I think, first of all, that we really do not watch closely the political turmoils in Ukraine, whereas we have to realize that the democratic legitimacy of Mr. Zelenskyy is questionable, because there should have been presidential elections in Ukraine a good couple of months ago. Of course, they did not happen due to the war ongoing. Nevertheless, if we take a look at opinion polls, we see that the support for Mr. Zelenskyy plummeted from about 80-something, 90% down to still over 50%. But now, so if I remember well, it was something like 53 or 51%. So it's quite low. As for the situation and as for the image of Mr. Zelenskyy, which he has also here in Poland. So I think it's just a move to consolidate power in the face of the growing problems also in Ukraine, problems also with public opinion, which has been becoming more and more fatigued with the war ongoing and with no end in sight. And if we speak about the Kursk operation, I think this has been a way or an attempt to put some political pressure on Russia to make it more willing to have negotiations. But now the question is, first, how long Ukraine can hold to the Kursk region, and then whether Russia really thinks that region or the area that is controlled by Ukraine as such a crucial area that it really puts any pressure, exerts any pressure on Kremlin. And I have growing doubts about it.
Well, going to this side, Bartosz, like Mr. Lukasz just mentioned, there haven't been an election in Ukraine due to the martial law, with Zelensky's popularity dwindling, even still it's over half. Do you think that this government reshuffle is an attempt more targeted at domestic politics other than something that we can expect out of foreign policy?
It is both. To an extent, I think that Mr. Zelenskyy is very, very occupied with leading a military campaign, not necessarily leading an electoral campaign. I'll be surprised if in the future there are indeed presidential elections in Ukraine that Mr. Zelenskyy would stand, because there's nothing inside that would suggest that presidential election would happen anytime soon. It is problematic for the Ukrainian government to conduct an election internally with some of its territories still occupied. And you know, in the end of the day, Mr. Zelenskyy is trying to consolidate power. What we've seen in this reshuffle is a very clear attempt to consolidate power within the presidential camp and take it away from increasingly independent politicians within the prime ministerial camp. Dmytro Kuleba, who is the foreign minister, he's been a trusted partner to Western allies, but he's been very well known both domestically and abroad, and as such has to an extent presented an independent party to Mr. Zelenskyy. There's never been really a significant signs of disagreement between the two men, and as we've seen from the fact itself that the minister resigned, which is not something that happened with every single person who faced a sack in this reshuffle. Some of them resisted being dismissed from their posts. So the disagreement between the two men wasn't significant, but indeed it's Zelenskyy trying to refresh the face of the government and trying to at least present it as a sort of him exercising a political mandate with some sort of a democratic support continuing into the future.
Right, Jacek, Bartosz just brought up a very important point about Dmytro Kuleba being kind of trusted for all this time by his Western allies. He's been making a lot of connections throughout since the beginning of the war. And we're also looking at the timing of this whole thing, where Ukraine is expected to propose some sort of victory plan to the United States. Do you think this timing would be a little bit sensitive to have a new foreign minister coming in?
Well, I think so. I think President Zelenskyy needed to confirm his strong position in Ukraine, to confirm to others, to the West especially, but also to members of his cabinet, because there are very difficult decisions ahead, ahead. When Putin comes back to the narrative with negotiations and some red lines for Russia and so on, Zelenskyy will finally have to decide what he's ready to sacrifice for peace, for negotiations with Russia, and he's under strong pressure from the West. So he has to, what he needs is freedom to take decision as he needs, not to consider, well, one minister will oppose, another will oppose, and so on and so on. He must be strong in this crucial moment.
Right. So as he's struggling with foreign policy and all these very difficult issues, it's really hard to kind of keep it together if his own cabinet also has their own ideas and everything kind of butting heads with each other.
And even if there is a risk, somebody will oppose. That's why he is sending his very close people to the crucial positions, not representatives of different political groups as we usually complete governments.
But we have to realize that eventually the decision that Jacek was speaking about will be formally, of course, taken also by the Ukraine's president, but in fact also by the strongest allies. Because this is that kind of war. This is not just a war between Russia and Ukraine. This is the war between the West and Russia to some extent. Although, luckily, we are not involved in a hot war. This is a kind of proxy war. Nevertheless, it is a war between those two parts of the world. So we should not pretend that Mr. Zelenskyy is completely or will be completely autonomous in his decisions. He will not be. And there is also one more factor which I would like to stress again. This is the factor of his own society. Because I think we still underestimate the war fatigue, which is getting stronger and stronger in Ukraine. It has been lasting really so long. There are so many people who have been on the front lines for months on end without any pause. And there is also a very, very big demographic problem in Ukraine because so many young people, young men, went to war. And there is also the question of rebuilding Ukraine after the hot phase of war ends. So these are all problems which I think we should also take into account.
Right, so a lot of things that needed to be addressed, and we'll have to see how the Ukrainian government deal with this new reality. Last but not least, let's use a little bit of time we have left to talk about our last topic, as we saw 2 regions in Germany has voted for the far right and the far left. Is political polarization on the rise when it comes to the European Union, or is that an isolated incident? We'll be discussing it real soon, but let's take a look at a report to find out more.
With nearly 30% of the vote, the far-right Alternative for Germany has become the largest party in the State Assembly of Thuringia. It's the first time the far-right has won a state election in Germany since World War II. Together with the AfD's excellent results in neighboring Saxony and the underwhelming performance of the political mainstream, it marks a potential turning point in German politics. The AfD is rapidly gaining influence in eastern Germany. The party has successfully tapped into widespread dissatisfaction with federal policies, particularly immigration. Experts point out that TikTok likely contributed to the party's success. In the weeks leading up to the election, AfD-related content on the platform reached a large audience, much larger than content related to other political parties. The app is known for pushing extremist views and reaching younger audiences with extraordinary success. Half of all 16 to 24-year-olds get their political information exclusively from TikTok, according to research. Adding another layer to the political dynamic is the rise of the BSW, the party of Sarah Wagenknecht. Although the BSW positions itself as a radical left-wing party, Wagenknecht's platform resonates with right-wing voters. She has adopted a critical stance toward the European Union, mixing leftist critiques with pro-Russian sentiments and social conservative talking points. The rise of both the AfD and the BSW reflects a deepening frustration with Germany's traditional political elites. In short, Chancellor Olaf Scholz has a problem. As the September 22nd election in Brandenburg approaches, the political stakes are high. If Brandenburg follows the trend seen in Thuringia and Saxony, it could deepen Germany's and Europe's worries.
All right, let's start this one with Sebastian, because I've been getting a very mixed commentary when it comes to this situation. Some people are describing the rise of AfD as a kind of limited incident that's more to East Germany. It's like a regional phenomenon, and it's not going to have widespread effects across Europe. But some people are also pointing to the past few rounds of European election and seeing Le Pen's popularity, and as well as other countries also seeming to be trending more right-wing, and not just right-wing, but to very far to the right. What's your take on this? Do you think it's more of a regional thing? Is it a global thing? Is it a European thing?
So, well, I recently have been speaking to some Germans from the West, actually, asking them the question, is it possible that AfD will be popular not only in the Eastern Germany, but in Germany overall? And they totally excluded that scenario. They say, well, you know what, we think it's impossible because you need to take into account that Germany is a country that consisting of 2 blocks. The old bloc, the Eastern, poorer, much poorer, with its own problems, and the Western bloc. So I would say that's an optimistic take on the situation, meaning that, well, in the poorest region, the countries tending to be more populistic are more popular. In the richer regions, they are less popular. That kind of counterbalance each other, and will have a good situation in the future. There will not be an epidemic of some kind of crazy ideas that are present among some of the AfD supporters. But, well, my feeling is the politics is nothing of the sort that could be predictable 100%. And as a French situation rightly invoked in the material suggests, Germany could also be susceptible to the nationwide popularity of far left or far right parties unless the crucial issues, for example, as immigration, are addressed, or energy crisis also.
All right, Bartosz, what's your take on this? Because we also saw a rise in popularity of these more extremist parties on younger voters, especially people who are voting for the first time. Do you think it's just, as our report pointed out, the social media influence, or is it more like topic related when it comes to economic situation, immigration topic? What's your take?
Well, when I was growing up in Poland, a certain far-right trend, certain alt-right parties were gaining on popularity, and indeed that was a trend that I could observe among many of my younger and age peers. It is not a phenomenon that is absent in any of the European countries. In most states of the European Union, there's a rise of far-right movements. In the UK, in the recent weeks, we've observed widespread riots. But the thing that we've noticed reporting on these riots is that the predominant parts of the people who went out onto the streets and saw discords, those were older people, but people quite often over the age of 50, very attached to their national identity and seeing outside danger to this national identity. This is not common. Not in common with what we're observing in Germany. I'm not going to bet my shirt on AfD taking power in Germany, taking over the government in Germany in the next couple of years. But the danger of these movements is that they exert influence over the main centrist parties, that they take these parties closer to the policies that these movements would like to see more present in the political spectrum. It was a reverse situation in the UK, actually. It was the Conservative government who resorted to some of the arguments that are in line with far-right rhetoric, and that kind of galvanized the far-right support in the country, even after the Conservative government left the power. What we will be seeing in Germany is not only regional politicians leaning closer to the AfD line of politics. We will also see the central government and discussion between the coalition members in Germany trying to address some of the concerns of that part of the populace who indeed are supportive of the AfD as things stand.
Right. Lukasz, we talk a lot about the far right, but during this election cycle, we also saw the more farther left parties on the rise. Do you think there's also a sentiment of people just being tired of the same old establishment system, and the younger folks are just trying to pursue change in any way, shape, or form they can find?
Well, in understanding what happened in Germany, in Saxony and Thuringia, we have to look at common points between the Alternative für Deutschland and Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht. And the common point is, one of the common points is their attitude towards immigration. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very easy to say, well, it's just TikTok, where these are populists. Populists have always been here. No, this is dodging real problems. And real problems are the question of immigration in Germany. We hardly have a month without a very grave event in Germany, like stabbing a policeman, murdering a policeman by a Muslim terrorist in Nuremberg, like Solingen. These were just, I think, month after month. This happened month after month. So the German public sees it and reacts. And what is the reaction? The reaction is rejecting the main the rhetoric of the main parties, of the mainstream parties, because they don't give any advice, they don't give any solution. And I would also discuss the question, what really can be called being populist. Why, if we take, for example, we have an El País page behind me with Alice Weidel, one of the most recognizable politicians of the AfD. Listen to her speeches. I personally do not really find anything populist in them. She just speaks like any kind of politician. She gives different solutions and different ways of seeing the situation, whereas mainstream politicians say, well, we should really not be closing our borders because this and that. She says, yes, we should close our borders. Why is it to be called a populist stand on the issue?
Right. Unfortunately,
what's populistic is the fact that borders are closed. And so when our borders are closed and you say we should close our borders, this is populism. This is clear.
All right. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. This has been a very, very riveting discussion. Thank you guys so much for helping us dissect all these topics. And guys, thank you for watching this edition of Press Review. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.